All right, so this next segment is a bit of a mixed bag. It's a little bit of a hybrid. Hybrid? That's not a word. It's a bit of a hybrid. It's a combination of a segment about technique, but also about coaching. What we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the technique you might use when returning serve, specifically the grips that you might use. What we're also going to do here is talk about some coaching best practices. What should you do as a coach to really sell a topic, to really make it clear what you're doing and why to your players? So let's get to it. When returning serve, it's important that we use the right kind of grip to give us what we want for the return. Consider that when you're returning serve, you're returning from a pretty long distance away, and we typically want to send the ball back toward the baseline of our opponents. We want to send that ball fairly far. So notice what we're doing here. We're talking about the return of serve. We're setting the context, making them be able to understand what it is that we're doing, sort of where that fits into a game, right? I'm returning serve. Now notice also when we do this, where I'm standing on the court. Well, where do you return serve from? You return serve from the baseline. So even though you're demonstrating just by dropping the ball to yourself, you should be standing in the realistic spot at the baseline. Again, this is going to help them connect what it is that they're learning to the real game of pickleball. So there's two grips that you might use that are going to make for effective returns. The first is what we call an Eastern forehand grip. So an Eastern forehand grip is where my hand is just slightly behind the handle of the paddle. And this is a useful grip because it's in a strong hitting position. And so I'm going to be able to hit this ball with some power and still have the stability I need. I could also use what we call a continental grip. And a continental grip is where the V of my hand is right on top of the handle here. Now, while this isn't as strong a hitting position, you'll notice that it does open the paddle face slightly. And so that's going to make it easier for me to send that ball with an arc. Let's take a look. Okay, so let's stop for a second. Did you see what I did there? What I wanted to do was make sure that we showed them that there are different options, that there's not just one way to do things, but there's a couple, right? They could use the continental grip if they wanted to. If they want to get that nice open face and have a lot of versatility, they can use their forehand and they can use their backhand. Or if they want to just change the grip just slightly, now they're hitting slightly behind the handle, which is a really strong grip to be in when you're hitting the forehand at least. And of course, there's that backhand option as well. So this is the thing. I think that's how it was. So this is the thing, when you're coaching, it's important to give your players options, not telling them that they have to do this or have to do that. Give them some options, help them understand why one might be preferable to the other, or at least what the advantages and disadvantages are, and then they can go from there. Here's the continental grip. Both grips are fairly useful at getting the ball deep in the court, one through a bit more speed and one through a little bit more height. But what about the backhand? Okay, so notice here how I gave them both forehand and backhand examples, right? And I demonstrated them so they could see them on the forehand and backhand side. Too often we as instructors only focus on the shot like we tend to like the best, or maybe our players like the best, and that's often the forehand. But it's really important that you show them what to do on both sides of their body and that you can demonstrate it as well. If I use an Eastern forehand grip when I'm hitting a forehand, that's okay. But if I use this grip when I'm hitting a backhand, my hand is now in a really weak hitting position. It's going to provide me without very much stability when hitting this ball. So there's a couple things that I could do. I could use that continental grip on the backhand as well. It's a slightly stronger hitting position, and I'll still get the open paddle face to be able to send that ball with some height. I have another option. If I really like the Eastern forehand grip and I want to use it on the backhand as well, I can use my second hand, my non-dominant hand, to provide more stability and support when I'm hitting. So even though the forehand is in a relatively weak position, the dominant hand is in a relatively weak position, using a forehand grip on the backhand side, by using the non-dominant hand to provide more stability when hitting that return of serve. Of course, on the backhand, I could also use the continental grip, again, because it's a relatively strong hitting position and it makes it easier to send the ball up. Okay, so there you go. If you're a pickleball player, now you can think a little bit more about the grips you might be using, the continental grip, the Eastern forehand grip when you're playing those returns of serve. And if you're going to use that Eastern forehand grip, maybe consider two hands on the backhand. If you're an instructor and you're watching this, here are some of the takeaways. One is we want to make sure that we set the context, that we help our players to understand where in the real game of pickleball does what we're about to talk about take place. In this case, the return of serve, right? Second is hit your shots from a realistic position on the court. If you're talking about volleys, then you should be up near the non-volley line. And if you're talking about returns of serve, you should be back at or really behind the baseline. It's important to demonstrate to your players what it is you want them to do. Show them the different variations, right, so they can see it. Don't forget, when possible, to give your players options. Help them understand that there's not just a single way to play pickleball or a single kind of technique, but there are different options out there that come with advantages and disadvantages, and maybe help them to make the right choice. And finally, try to make sure that your instructions are correct, concise, and really clear. Say as much as you have to, but try not to say more than that. Then you can spend less time talking and more time practicing.